Welcome back to The Rundown. Well, it's the book the White House definitely does not want you to read. Former National Security Advisor John Bolton's account of his time serving at the president's side. And given the revelations already made public in press reports, it's clear why the Trump administration is still fighting to keep the full story under wraps. John Lawrence has more.
John Bolton's book on his time in the Trump administration contains some bombshells.
I think Putin thinks he can play him like a fiddle. I think he sees that he's not faced with a serious adversary here. I don't think he's worried about Donald Trump.
The room where it happened also accuses President Trump of asking China's Xi Jinping for help in winning the 2020 election. Bolton also claims Mr. Trump approved of Xi's regime building concentration camps for Uyghur Muslims. President Trump defended himself Wednesday night and returned a few barbs at Bolton.
He couldn't get Senate confirmed, so I gave him a non-Senate confirmed position where I could just put him there, see how he worked. And I wasn't very enamored.
Justice Department officials say they believe the book contains sensitive material that could endanger U.S. national security and are trying to prevent its release.
John Bolton should know all too well that it's unacceptable to have highly classified information from the government of the United States in a book that will be published.
This isn't the only book battle on the president's plate right now. There's also Too Much and Never Enough: How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man by Mary Trump, the president's niece. The Daily Beast reports President Trump is considering legal action to prevent that book from getting published. I'm John Lawrence reporting.
Now, one of the revelations in Bolton's book that's raising eyebrows here in Israel is his claim that Prime Minister Netanyahu doubted Jared Kushner's ability to lead the U.S. Mideast peace plan, writing, quote, Netanyahu was dubious about assigning the task of bringing an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict to Kushner, whose family Netanyahu had known for many years. He was enough of a politician not to oppose the idea publicly, but like much of the world, he wondered why Kushner thought he would succeed where the likes of Kissinger had failed. Well, the Israeli Prime Minister's office has issued a statement denying those claims, saying, quote, Netanyahu has complete faith in Jared Kushner's ability and resolves and rejects any description to the contrary. Well, for more on this, let's speak to Joel Rubin. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State and former Jewish Outreach Director to Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, and he speaks to us from Maryland. And we also have with us Matthew RJ Brodsky, Senior Fellow at the Gold Institute for International Strategy in Washington, D.C. And Joel, let's start with you as a former State Department official. Just give us your main takeaway reaction to what we already know about what's in this book.
My goodness, it's a real feast for the eyes, this book, Calev. We basically see the corruption of the American presidency in full form. We see all the lines that have been obvious for the last several years filled in between those lines with data and details. The president used the power of his office to try to get a foreign government, China, in the public, in what we've been discussing publicly, to get China to help him win the White House again. He clearly used Ukraine to help him win the White House. He essentially has violated his oath repeatedly, not to mention a deep level of incompetence that John Bolton pointed out, a lack of knowledge about even Britain having nuclear weapons. So it's just devastating as a portrait of the American presidency and of Donald Trump. And John Bolton doesn't look good, I do want to add, for having sat on all of this information rather than gone public or blown the whistle or testified as he should have. Really, it's a bad mark for everybody that's been in this administration.
All right, Matthew, I want you to respond. It sounds like Joel agrees, maybe the only time in his life with John Bolton, that President Trump is not fit to be president. What's your response, Matthew?
Well, look, I mean, you're pointing this out. For political expediency, obviously the political left in the United States suddenly finds that Bolton is their hero, except wasn't important enough that they wanted to actually subpoena him to bring him in to testify on their second time they failed at trying to impeach the president. Look, I think if you're an ideologue like John Bolton is, I mean, everyone knows what his viewpoints have been. He's very well written on that before he joined the administration. He was a commentator on a popular American news network is his views were always out there. What you have in President Trump is not someone who is overly ideological. He sees himself more as a CEO presiding over different viewpoints in an administration. And so John Bolton, frankly, I think at this point, even though we do, if you're me at least, you thank him for everything he's done over Iran and can agree with him on a lot of the policy choices he made, but he clearly sees himself as being at the end of his career, and this is the best payday he can possibly get. It's certainly going to be one of the best-selling books ever on the New York Times list, and he'll make a lot of money, and this is what he's trying to do. It's an unfortunate timing. I don't think it puts the country first, but I mean, that's how I see it.
Well, let's get a little to the substance. Or Joel, do you agree with Matthew? This is just the difference between an ideologue on one side and someone who sees himself as a CEO-type president on the other.
Oh, not at all. If this was a company, the company would have gone bankrupt by now. The CEO is completely incompetent, and I appreciate Matt's point, but this is not the far left idealizing John Bolton. Make no bones about it. We are not happy with John Bolton failing to testify like our civil servants did to bring this out when he could have had a positive impact on the direction of the country. And this is not ideological. The irony here is that John Bolton quit because he couldn't get a full-on war with Iran out of Donald Trump. He didn't quit when he saw Donald Trump asking the Chinese to change the course of American democracy. He didn't quit when Donald Trump green-lighted concentration camps for Uyghurs in China. None of that seemed to offend him because he hoped he could get his war, and he didn't. So that's the only ideological split. But the rest of that is a deep corruption of the American democratic system.
Well, I want you to respond, Matthew, but I do also want to ask you, do you accept what John Bolton is saying as truth, whatever his ideology, or do you agree with President Trump that he's lying in these instances?
Look, on the whole business with China, this is, first of all, hearsay from Bolton, and it's been denied quite strenuously by those who are actually there in these meetings in question. And it's, again, in much the same way the left is now going to embrace Bolton. The idea that this is the party, of course, that if you were to say the Wuhan virus or the China virus, would just lose their minds completely. So the idea that they're the party that's stronger on China when we've seen actual evidence of what
there's no strength coming out of this White House on China,
and it's also Biden's own words, who of course recently had said that China's not the issue. So I think on each of the issues, what you see primarily is John Bolton wanting to have a far more hawkish policy, and that's something that Trump was not always okay with. I've worked with a lot of the people in the National Security Council for the Trump administration. I know what the inner tug of war were for sanctions and everything like that. And it wasn't that Bolton wanted to have a war. Joel, of course, knows that's absurd.
Well, Joel,
he wanted, though, to kill the deal.
He wrote columns about that, Matt.
Before he joined the administration.
So of course he wanted a war. I mean, this is not surprising. John Bolton wants a war with Iran. It's his public position.
His position on wanting to, of course, bomb the nuclear reactor was during the zone of immunity before the program was this advanced. Number one, it was also based a lot on an assumption of a Democrat.
But I think
Biden would end up embracing the nuclear deal.
I think here's the challenge, though, where Matt and I are definitely going to have a disagreement, and I respect Matt's views on this, and I enjoy this discussion. The concern we've got with John Bolton pointing out these issues right now is that we as a country have grossly incompetent leadership at the top. We have a coronavirus that's decimated our economy, killed over 100,000 Americans, and for 2 months, President Trump acted as if it was nothing to do. There was nothing to worry about. He was soliciting help from China, offering free benefits, offering good trade deals. Then all of a sudden he realizes this is bad politics. He's going to sound tough on China. It's all over the place.
Okay, I want to give Matt, we have 20 seconds for you to respond. I do want to, really, literally 20 seconds.
In the context of the time, what Trump was after was getting a trade deal with China after he was really tough on them. Obviously, the context changed when it turned to the coronavirus. And I think the evidence is quite clear of where Trump stands. And Bolton made his point clear as well.
Well, gentlemen, I think these debates are going to continue when the full book comes out, and it looks like it is going to come out despite the White House's best efforts. Joel Rubin and Matthew Brodsky, thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
And we'll be right back after this break.